We want to see an approach to fighting the climate crisis where it doesn't put the burden on the backs of working people.
Jagmeet Singh and the NDP are caving to the political pressures from Pierre Poilievre.
If the federal government decides to remove the legal backstop requiring us to have a consumer carbon tax in British Columbia, we will end the consumer carbon tax in British Columbia.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau taking aim at the leader of the NDP, the federal one, of course, Jagmeet Singh. That's because yesterday Singh told reporters he believes in fighting climate change, but not on the backs of consumers. It's a bit of a pile-on, the PM's marquee climate policy, with BC Premier David Eby there announcing that he'd scrap the consumer tax in his province if they lose that federal backstop. So is the consumer version of this levy going to disappear? Let's ask the front bench. Sabrina Grover was a Liberal candidate in the 2021 federal election. She's now the founder and principal of Shakti Strategies. Melanie Paradis was the director of communications for former Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole. She's now the president of Texture Communications. And Gurdatin Singh works for Crestview Strategies. He's former MPP, and the brother of NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Sabrina, let's start with you. Now, you may have heard earlier in the show, Catherine McKenna, she spoke about all of the leaders and criticizing them for not doing a better job in supporting a price on pollution. So how much of the blame is on Prime Minister Trudeau in that?
You know, at the end of the day, this move by the NDP, I think, is really interesting and really cynical. I think as a party that claims to defend the environment and be really, critical about the carbon tax, they haven't come to the table with their own plan or with any ideas about how they're actually going to do that. And so when we talk about the Liberals and what they've put forward on the table, it has been an effective plan. Has there been some missteps on execution? For sure. And a lot of that has to do with the communication around that plan. But at the end of the day, the consumer carbon tax is working. And so I think that the Liberals can still continue to ride on that. But, I really have a question around the NDP pulling their support and what else they're going to put on the table. They haven't made it clear how they're going to defend the environment, and they continue to just pull out this, cynical kind of approach to politics over the last month that hasn't made it clear what they're doing for Canadians, and specifically on this file, what are they doing for the environment?
And just a quick correction, Sabrina is with Spark Advocacy now. Apologies for that error early on. Gurdatin, I want you to respond to that. Do you think that your brother is walking away from a price on pollution, and respond to the criticism that Sabrina just put forward there of Mr. Singh?
So let's start by saying that the NDP clearly recognizes that you need a price on pollution and recognizes that the climate crisis is the greatest, if not one of the greatest crises that is facing humanity right now. What you're seeing, though, from the NDP, both federally and provincially now, is that as a result of the Liberals' mismanagement of this carbon tax, the fact that they opened up themselves to criticism when they actually opened up the criticism for being not trustful around this issue when they did the Atlantic province carve-out. That, I think, was the first chink in the armor to this policy, when they lacked that consistency across the board. Now what you see the NDP putting forth both federally and provincially now is to say, yes, we need a price on pollution, and yes, we need to fight the climate crisis, but who should bear the brunt of it? And what you're seeing from the NDP on both levels now is a focus instead away from consumers and onto big polluters. This is very consistent with NDP policy, ideology, and belief systems to make sure that those who have the capabilities and those who are creating more pollution should pay appropriate amount of, they should be held accountable in an appropriate, measurable way. So I think the true cynicism comes from the Liberals and the fact that they mismanaged this file, that they did this Atlantic carve-out, that opened up a lot of criticism. They haven't met any of their green targets to date. All of this has resulted a lot of lack of trust from progressives towards the Liberals. And I think instead, progressives are now looking to the NDP to provide true leadership to how to fight the climate crisis and hold those who are really causing or creating this pollution accountable for a form of price on pollution.
Now, Melanie, it's interesting where the Conservatives are and really where you're placed in all of this, because as we mentioned earlier, you were the director of communications for Aaron O'Toole. And in the 2021 campaign, he actually had a price in pollution in his platform. So how do you explain that massive shift by the Conservatives And especially when you consider that Pierre Poilievre ran in that election with that platform that had a price on pollution.
So I would suggest that, first of all, we've all seen the postmortem on how that went. And I think that policy was really the beginning of the end of Mr. O'Toole's leadership of the Conservative Party. And that
I take your point, Melanie, but I just want to interject for a second, because I'm just trying to make the point that all parties in that election, including the Conservatives, had some sort of a price on pollution. And I don't want to sort of drill down on what the Conservative plan was. I'm just saying that the Conservatives agreed to put a price on pollution, but clearly Mr. Poilievre is going the complete opposite way with that.
Okay, so the environment is what I like to call a good times issue. It polls really well with Canadians when things are good in the economy. And right now, things are not going well. So a few years ago, when all of the parties had a price on pollution as part of their platforms, the environment was polling a lot more strongly as an issue. I'm being very cynical here and frank with the audience, but the reality is the NDP have looked at the polling. They've got a provincial election in British Columbia in October, and the NDP federally have 2 by-elections they're about to lose. And they're saying, we're going to need to change our approach on the environment because it's no longer a top issue for Canadians and for people in these ridings in particular for the by-elections coming up next week. Instead, the economy and affordability is the #1 issue for these voters. And so the NDP have smartly come to the conclusion that they need to distance themselves from the carbon tax because it doesn't work. And I think that Garatin made a good point that the Liberals have no one to blame but themselves for this, and they opened themselves up to this happening a year ago when they made that carve out for Atlantic Canada and the carbon tax. That was the beginning of the end of the carbon tax, and I think that we will see an end to it very soon.
You know, Melanie, I can always depend on you to spit facts and really cut through everything. And, you know, you're not to say that Garatin and Sabrina don't, but 2 weeks in a row, you're just coming with high heat, and we appreciate it here. Okay.